AITA for refusing to give up my promotion for my husband. He is against it and says I'm putting money over marriage. I have worked my ass off for years. Late nights, extra projects, proving myself over and over again. I climbed the ranks the hard way, through sheer determination and relentless effort. I stayed late when others clocked out, I volunteered for the tough assignments, and I never once let anyone say I was not capable. I knew what I wanted, and I went after it with everything I had. And then, finally, it happened. The moment I had been working toward for years. A huge promotion. A significant raise. A chance to move up in my field in a way that would change everything for me. This was not just a job offer. It was validation. It was proof that all those late nights, all the sacrifices, all the times I had doubted myself had been worth it. I had made it. When I told my husband, I expected him to be happy for me. I expected excitement, pride, maybe even a celebration. Instead, the first words out of his mouth were, "But what about us?" It caught me off guard. I had not expected that to be his reaction. So, I explained. Yes, the promotion came with longer hours. Yes, there would be some travel, but nothing extreme. I would still be home. I would still be present. Things might shift a little, sure, but nothing we could not adjust to. We had always been a team, and I believed we could work through it together. But he was not convinced. The questions started small, little doubts dropped into the conversation like pebbles into water, rippling outward. Do you really need a bigger job? I thought we wanted to focus on starting a family soon. His tone was gentle at first, but it did not take long for concern to turn into something else, something sharper, something weighted with expectation. And then came the comments about his parents. How his dad had always been the provider. How his mom had stayed home and taken care of the family. How their marriage had worked because they had clear roles. I listened, waiting for the part where he acknowledged that we were not them, that we had always built our marriage differently. But that part never came. I reminded him that I had never hidden who I was. When we got married, he knew I was ambitious. He knew I had goals. He had encouraged me, at least, I thought he had. He had told me he was proud of me, that he supported me. But now, faced with the reality of my success, his words felt like a lie. And then, he said it. The words that changed everything. If you really loved me, you'd turn it down. This isn't just about you. That was the moment the floor dropped out from under me. It was never about us. It was about control. It was about his comfort, his expectations, his belief that my ambitions should have an expiration date. That I should shrink myself to fit into the life he had imagined, one where I stayed within the boundaries he had silently drawn for me. So, I took the job. And now, everything is different. He barely looks at me. The warmth that once filled our home has been replaced by an icy distance, a silence that stretches between us like a canyon. Conversations are clipped, mechanical, spoken out of necessity rather than care. The man who once held me close, who kissed me on the forehead and told me he believed in me, now treats me like a stranger. His family has not been subtle about their opinions. The whispers are loud enough to hear. She put money over marriage. What kind of wife chooses a career over her husband? She's going to regret this. I should be celebrating. I should be proud. And in some ways, I am. I earned this. I fought for it. But I cannot ignore the weight of what I have lost. Not because I regret my decision, because I do not. But because I finally see the truth. He never wanted a wife. He wanted someone willing to live in his shadow. Update 1. A few weeks after I accepted the offer, the tension in our house had reached a breaking point. It was no longer the quiet unease of a couple adjusting to change, it was something colder, something sharper. Mike barely spoke to me, and when he did, his words were clipped, his tone devoid of warmth. The once easy conversations we had over dinner were gone, replaced by stony silence or, worse, passive-aggressive remarks delivered with a forced casualness. It was like living with a stranger, one who resented my very presence in the home we had built together. He moved through the house like a ghost, a silent accusation in every glance, in every moment he chose to sit in another room rather than beside me. At first, I tried to justify it to myself. Maybe it was just wounded pride, the shock of realizing that the life he had envisioned was shifting in ways he had not prepared for. Maybe he needed time to adjust. People do not always react well to change, and even though I had hoped for his support, I had to allow him the space to process his feelings. I told myself that once he saw that nothing between us had truly changed, that we could still be the same couple we had always been, he would come around. That the coldness in his eyes would thaw, that he would smile at me the way he used to, with pride instead of disappointment. I was willing to be patient. I was willing to give him time. But then, strange things started happening at work. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, the kind of thing that could be brushed off as coincidence if it had not started piling up so quickly. My boss mentioned, almost in passing, that she had received an anonymous letter about me. At first, I laughed, assuming it was some kind of mistake, a bizarre prank or misdirected gossip. But then she told me what it said, and the laughter died in my throat. The letter claimed that I did not plan to stay at the company for long. That I had misled them by accepting the promotion, knowing full well that I was about to take maternity leave. That I had manipulated my way into a position I had no intention of committing to. I felt the blood drain from my face as she spoke, my mind scrambling to process the sheer absurdity of it. It was a lie. A calculated, deliberate lie. And what scared me most was that it had to have come from someone who knew me personally. Someone who knew that this was the one accusation that could damage me, that could make my boss hesitate before trusting me with new responsibilities. I forced myself to stay calm, to reassure her that there was no truth to it, that I was fully committed to my role. She nodded, and though she did not say anything outright, I could tell that the seed of doubt had been planted. It lingered in the way she hesitated before giving me new tasks, in the way she observed me more carefully in meetings, as if she were trying to decipher whether the accusations had merit. And then, the rumors started. At first, it was just a few odd glances from colleagues, whispers that stopped when I walked into the room. Then, people started hinting that they had heard things about me. That someone in my circle had been telling others I was already looking for another job. That I was using this promotion as a stepping stone to something else and had no real loyalty to the company. It was all a lie. I had done nothing to suggest I was anything less than fully dedicated, but rumors have a way of sticking, of growing into something impossible to fully erase. No matter how hard I tried to stamp them out, they kept coming back, always just out of reach, always just enough to make people second-guess me. I started feeling paranoid. Someone was deliberately trying to undermine me, to cast doubt on my commitment, to make my position feel less secure. And it was working. I could feel the shift in the air, the way people spoke to me with just a little more caution, the way opportunities seemed to come just a little slower than they should have. Who would do this? Who was so determined to see me fail? And then, one evening, I got my answer. I had gone to grab Mike's phone to check the time. It was something I had done 1,000 times before, a completely thoughtless action. But as I picked it up, his screen lit up with a notification from his mother. I should have put it down. I should have ignored it. But something in my gut told me not to. Something deep inside me, a part of me that I had been ignoring for weeks, whispered that I needed to look. I opened the message thread, and the words on the screen made my stomach churn. If she doesn't get the promotion, she will understand that this is a sign. She will calm down and focus on her family. I read it again. And again. My hands trembled as I processed the full weight of what I was seeing. This was not fear. This was not insecurity. This was sabotage. Mike had been actively working against me. He had been trying to ensure that I failed. He had lied to my colleagues, planted doubts in my boss's mind, gone behind my back in an effort to manipulate my future. He had done everything in his power to make sure I never got the chance to step into the role I had worked so hard for. And he had done it with the full knowledge and support of his mother, as if my success was some kind of disease that needed to be cured before it spread too far. I put the phone down carefully, my hands shaking so badly I thought I might drop it. The weight of the betrayal settled over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. This was not the man I had married. The man I had married had told me he was proud of me. He had encouraged me. He had made me believe that we were a team. And yet, he had failed. He had underestimated me. I had fought for this job, and I was damn good at it. Despite his best efforts, I had proven myself. I had silenced the doubts, outperformed every expectation, and made it clear that I was exactly where I was meant to be. He could not stop me. But I could not look at him the way I used to. Update 2. After discovering the message from Mike's mother, I knew I had to be careful. The betrayal was fresh, raw, and sitting in the pit of my stomach like a lead weight. But I was not about to confront him without a plan. If he was willing to go behind my back to sabotage my career, I needed to be smarter. Emotional reactions would give him ammunition, and I refused to hand him that power. So I started paying closer attention, watching for the cracks in his facade, waiting for the moment he slipped up. And it did not take long for more things to come to light. A few days later, I was in the middle of my workday when an email popped into my inbox from HR. The subject line alone sent a wave of unease through me: request for meeting, concerns regarding performance. My stomach clenched as I clicked it open. I had never had a single complaint about my work. I had never missed a deadline, never given anyone a reason to question my professionalism. So why was HR suddenly investigating my performance? The email asked me to come in for a discussion regarding anonymous concerns about my ability to handle my new role. The wording was vague, but the implication was clear: someone was painting me as a problem. I walked into that meeting with my head held high, but as soon as the HR representative slid a printed-out email toward me, my confidence hardened into quiet fury. The email detailed accusations that I was emotionally unstable due to personal issues at home, that I had become distracted, unreliable, and that my performance had suffered as a result. It was phrased carefully, avoiding outright claims but planting just enough doubt to warrant an investigation. I felt the blood pounding in my ears as I read. It was not just an attempt to discredit me, it was an effort to create a paper trail, to make my downfall appear inevitable. The moment I finished reading, I knew exactly who was behind it. Mike. Or his mother. Or both. They had already tried to shake my reputation with whispers and lies, but this was something more. This was strategic, an attack designed to erode my credibility from the inside. I kept my face neutral, my expression calm, as I met the HR rep's gaze and systematically dismantled every baseless claim. I pointed to my work, my track record, my performance metrics that were stronger than ever. I refused to show even the slightest crack, knowing that was exactly what they wanted. HR reassured me that they were simply following protocol, that no formal action was being taken against me, but I saw it: the same seed of uncertainty that had been planted in my boss's mind was now sitting in theirs. I left that meeting furious but more determined than ever. If Mike wanted to play dirty, he had no idea who he was dealing with. That night, I tested him. I sat across from him at dinner, carefully setting the scene, pretending like everything was fine. Casually, I mentioned the HR complaint, pretending it was an amusing inconvenience rather than a calculated attack on my livelihood. And then, I watched. His fork paused mid-air for half a second, an almost imperceptible flicker of hesitation before he forced himself to continue eating. His expression was too careful, his concern too measured, his questions too rehearsed. He was guilty. And now I knew it for certain. But I needed more. I needed proof. A week later, I got it. I had left work early, needing a moment to breathe, to regroup, to plan my next move. As I walked up to our house, I noticed that Mike's office door was slightly ajar. He was on the phone, his voice low and tense, and something in my gut told me to stop and listen. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. He was explaining my downfall like it was a business strategy, cool and detached. "She's too stubborn, but if they start doubting her, maybe she'll quit on her own. Just keep pushing it, make her look unreliable. She'll crack eventually." I felt my breath catch, my hands curling into fists at my sides. He was not just hoping I would fail. He was orchestrating it. He was feeding these lies, guiding them, ensuring that I was painted as unstable and unfit until I either broke or walked away on my own. He was actively working to dismantle everything I had built, and he was doing it with complete confidence that it would work. I stepped away before he noticed me, my pulse hammering as the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was not just about control anymore. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was personal. And I was done playing defense. Update 3. I knew I could not let this go. This was no longer just about my job, It was about proving, to myself and to everyone watching, that I would not be broken. That I would not be controlled. That I would not allow anyone, least of all the man who had vowed to stand beside me, to dictate my worth. So I gathered evidence. I started small, collecting every suspicious email, every vague HR complaint, every offhand comment from a colleague that hinted at whispers circulating behind my back. I made notes of the timing, the patterns, the way these doubts had crept into my career the moment I had stepped into my promotion. I traced every false rumor back to its source, connecting dots that all led in one clear direction: Mike. I stopped dismissing the gut feelings, the uneasy glances exchanged when I entered a room, the sudden hesitations from my boss that had never been there before. I looked back through my work emails, reading between the lines, noticing the subtle shifts in tone from people who had once been confident in me. I documented everything. Because I knew that if I was going to take him down, I needed more than suspicion. I needed undeniable, indisputable proof. And then, I did something that I knew would force his hand. I told him I was thinking about leaving the company. I made sure my voice sounded tired, my body language defeated. I let the stress show in my posture, let him see the weight I was carrying. I pretended to question if all of this was worth it, if maybe I had made the wrong choice in fighting so hard for this promotion. I told him I felt drained, that I wasn't sure if I could keep doing this. And then, I waited. His reaction was immediate. Too quick, too eager. His posture shifted, his shoulders losing that ever-present tension he had been carrying since the day I got the job. His relief was barely contained, masked under a thin layer of fake sympathy. He tried to sound supportive, reassuring, telling me that maybe stepping back was the right choice, that my well-being mattered more than any job, that he had been so worried about me. But his voice betrayed him. There was a satisfaction underneath his words, a victory barely concealed. He thought he had won. He thought his plan had worked. That night, while he slept beside me, oblivious and smug in his success, I used his phone. I had learned my lesson from the last time. I was careful, methodical, making sure I left no trace of what I was doing. I scrolled through his messages, finding exactly what I had been expecting. Every conversation with his mother, every text detailing how they had been guiding me back to the right path. The arrogance was astounding, the way they spoke about me as if I were some wayward child in need of correction rather than a grown woman making decisions for her own future. They had orchestrated every step, feeding the rumors, planting the doubts, ensuring that the pressure would become unbearable until I broke. And then, the final piece of evidence, an unsent draft email. Addressed to my boss. He had not even been subtle. The email implied that I had been considering stepping down for personal reasons, carefully worded to make it seem as though the decision was entirely mine. He had been preparing to make it official before I had even spoken a word of it myself. I took pictures. I forwarded everything to my own email. I made sure I had copies saved in multiple places. And then, I set his phone back exactly where it had been and lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside me. The next morning, I did not hesitate. I went straight to HR. I laid it all out. The complaints, the rumors, the messages. The evidence that someone had been actively working to sabotage me, that this had never been about my performance but about manipulation and control. I watched as their expressions changed, as the weight of what I was showing them settled in. They knew this was serious. They knew this was a deliberate attack, and they knew they had let themselves be played. And then, I dropped the final bombshell. I showed them the messages from my own husband's phone. The shift was immediate. The atmosphere in the room changed, the conversation moving from polite professionalism to something sharper, more urgent. This was no longer an internal issue. This was bigger. HR took one look at the messages and knew they had a real problem on their hands. They launched a formal investigation, pulling records, questioning the validity of every claim that had been made against me. It did not take long before the inconsistencies surfaced, before the web of lies started to unravel. The tide shifted back in my favor so quickly it was almost laughable. But I was not done. That night, I confronted Mike. I sat across from him, calm and composed, as I told him I knew everything. That I had the proof. That I had already gone to HR. I watched as the color drained from his face, as his mouth opened and closed uselessly, his mind scrambling for an explanation that would save him. He stammered out excuses, tried to twist it, saying he had only done it because he was worried about our future, that he had been acting out of love, that he just wanted what was best for us. But love does not look like sabotage. Love does not look like manipulation. He had never wanted a partner. He had wanted a woman who would fit into the life he had imagined, the role he had carved out. And when I stepped outside of that role, he had tried to drag me back by force. He had tried to break me, to mold me into something smaller, something more manageable. And he had failed. As for my job, I thrived. The moment HR knew the truth, every bit of doubt that had been planted in my boss's mind disappeared. The trust that had been eroding was restored tenfold. The opportunities that had slowed down came back stronger than ever. I was sharper, more determined, more relentless in my pursuit of success. I had fought for my place, and I had won. Mike had underestimated me. He had believed he could manipulate my future. He had believed I would surrender. But he had never understood who he was dealing with.